In 2003, you could walk into a dealership in Texas and drive home a brand new pickup truck for $12,000. It was simple, it was reliable, and it was completely legal. Until one morning, it wasn't. No recall, no safety failure, no accident. Just a quiet decision made in Washington, D.C. And overnight, that truck became illegal to own, drive, or sell in certain parts of the United States. Thousands of owners had no idea. Some found out at a smog check. Some found out when they tried to register. Some never found out at all. The truck hadn't changed. The road hadn't changed. But the rules had. And the people who wrote those rules, they never had to drive one. Here's what actually happened and why it's still affecting truck owners today. The truck was called the Ranger. Ford Ranger. Built tough, priced low, and sold by the millions across America. In 2003, a working man in Houston could buy one for just over $12,000. No luxury features, no fancy tech, just a reliable engine, a solid frame, and a bed that could carry anything you needed. For small business owners, contractors, and farmers, it wasn't just a truck. It was how they made a living. And Ford knew exactly who was buying it. That's why they kept making it affordable. That's why they kept it simple. For years, the Ranger was one of the best-selling compact pickups in the country. Dealers couldn't keep them on the lot. Customers were loyal. Some families bought 3 generations of Rangers: grandfather, son, grandson. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a tradition. But here's what those buyers didn't know. Behind the scenes, a quiet legal battle was already underway. Not in a courtroom, not in public, in a small government office in California. A regulatory agency most Americans had never heard of was rewriting the emissions rulebook, and they were doing it fast. By the time Ford got the official notice, it was already too late. The 2004 Ranger, already built, already sitting in dealership lots across 15 states, was now out of compliance. Not because it was dangerous, not because it polluted more than before, but because the standard had moved, and the truck hadn't. The agency was called CARB. California Air Resources Board. Most people outside California had never heard of it, but it had more power over the American auto industry than almost any other body in the country. Here's why. Under a federal law called the Clean Air Act, California was the only state allowed to set its own vehicle emissions standards, and any other state could choose to adopt California's rules instead of the federal ones. By 2004, 15 states had done exactly that. That meant CARB's decisions didn't just affect California drivers. They affected the entire northeastern United States. New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, all of them bound by whatever California decided.
They raised the emissions threshold right here, allowing for significantly higher output moving forward.
The new standard was called LEV2, Low Emission Vehicle, Phase 2. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a hard cutoff, and the 2004 Ford Ranger's engine couldn't meet it, not without a major redesign. Ford's engineers knew this. They had flagged the issue internally months earlier, but the timeline had been miscalculated. By the time the paperwork caught up with the production line, thousands of Rangers were already built, already shipped, already on dealer lots in affected states.
Good. Wait, say that again? All of them. What are we going to do with all these trucks now?
Do not sell the Ranger in your state.
Look, I told him in the office we could move these all day at this price. This truck right here, she's solid. You won't find a better deal.
It wasn't. Then came the letter from Ford Corporate, and buried inside that letter was one line that changed everything. It said the trucks couldn't just be held. They had to be sent back. But sent back to where? Ford didn't have a clean answer. The trucks couldn't be sold in the affected states. They couldn't be modified fast enough to meet the new standard. And they couldn't just sit on dealer lots indefinitely. So Ford did something that shocked even veteran industry insiders. They redirected the inventory. Thousands of 2004 Rangers, fully built, fully functional, were quietly rerouted to states where CARB rules didn't apply. Texas, Florida, Georgia. States still operating under the federal standard. It was legal, but it wasn't something Ford advertised. No press release, no announcement, just a silent reshuffling of inventory across state lines.
We got her done. Glad we could make that work for you.
Yeah, she's perfect.
But then came the problem nobody had planned for. Some of those trucks had already been purchased, not by dealership, by individual buyers, men who had signed the paperwork, paid in full, and driven home. In states like Connecticut and Vermont, a handful of Rangers had already been registered, legally purchased before the hold order came through. And now those owners were getting letters too, not from Ford, from their state DMV. The letter informed them that their vehicle did not meet current state emissions certification. It didn't say they had to return it immediately, but it said that when the registration came up for renewal, it might not be approved. One contractor in Vermont had bought his Ranger to replace a truck he'd driven for 11 years. He'd already used it for 3 months on job sites, and now he was being told it might not be street legal by spring. He called his dealer. The dealer had no answer. He called Ford, and what Ford told him, nobody saw coming. Ford's answer was simple. They would buy the truck back. Full purchase price. No questions asked. On paper, it sounded fair, but there was a catch. The buyback was voluntary. Ford couldn't legally force anyone to return a vehicle they already own, which meant some owners had a choice to make. Take the money, or keep the truck and gamble on what came next. Most took the buyback, but a few didn't, and those who held on quickly discovered something Ford hadn't mentioned in any letter. The problem wasn't just registration renewal. In some states, if your vehicle failed emissions certification, you couldn't legally drive it on public roads at all. Not to work, not to a job site, not even to the grocery store. One contractor in Massachusetts, a man who had owned the truck for just 4 months, was told by his state inspector that the vehicle couldn't be passed. Not because it was smoking, not because it was broken, but because it lacked the specific certification code required under LEV2, a code that could only be issued by the manufacturer. And Ford had stopped issuing it for that engine configuration entirely. The truck ran perfectly. It passed every mechanical check, but on paper, it didn't exist as a legal vehicle in that state. He had a $12,000 truck sitting in his driveway, fully operational and completely undrivable. He wasn't alone. Across the affected states, a small but growing number of owners were stuck in the same position. And then someone started asking a different question entirely. Not, how do we fix this? But, did Ford know this was coming before they sold the trucks? The answer, it turned out, was yes. Ford's internal documents, later reviewed during state-level consumer complaints, showed that engineers had flagged the LEV2 compliance gap as early as mid-2003, months before production finished, months before the truck shipped, but the decision was made to continue anyway. The reasoning was financial. Halting production mid-cycle would have cost more than managing the fallout afterward. It was a calculated risk, and ordinary buyers paid the price for it. The contractor in Massachusetts eventually took the buyback. He had no real choice. The man in Vermont held out for 7 months before his registration was denied at renewal. He took the buyback too. In total, Ford repurchased several hundred Rangers across the affected states. The trucks were transported to redistribution lots in non-CARB states. Some were resold, some were auctioned. A few ended up in fleet sales. The buyers in those states had no idea about any of it. They just saw a good truck at a fair price, and that was the part that stayed with people longest. The truck itself was never the problem. It ran well. It lasted. Owners in Texas and Georgia drove those same 2004 Rangers for over a decade without a single emissions issue. The problem was the line drawn on a map, and who drew it, and who decided that a working man's truck, already paid for, already parked in his driveway, was suddenly on the wrong side of it. Regulations exist for a reason, but sometimes the system moves faster than the people inside it, and those people are left holding the consequences. If stories like this are worth your time, you know where the subscribe button is.